Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm Dr. Deborah Thompson and the founder of OneHealthLessons.com. Thank you very much for attending this lesson that's entitled Outbreak, One World, One Health. Today we are going to go over several ideas, particularly focusing on what One Health is, as well as what a zoonotic disease is, a mutation is, and a vaccine. Now, we're all adults in this audience. We have probably heard at least half of these terms, but what I really want you to get out of this particular lesson is to see how can you communicate sometimes very tricky ideas for younger people in your community. So we will go over this together. First, what is One Health? One Health is simply the connection between animal health, human health, and environmental health. Now notice how with environmental health I have a tree here. Some people have a further differentiation of saying plant health in addition to environmental health. In general, though, what One Health is truly the middle section where everything does come together. And the One Health approach is having people come from the different backgrounds of animal health, say veterinarians, for instance, human health, public health experts, physicians, and environmental health, climate change scientists, water specialists, plant specialists, environmental health scientists, all of us working towards the same goal, which is making sure animals stay healthy, people stay healthy, and the environment stay healthy. Now, what is a zoonotic disease? It's simply a disease that can spread between different species. Now, keep in mind, it is possible for some diseases to jump from people back into other animals, because ultimately humans are animals. Now, examples of zoonotic disease. And the way to remember the word zoonotic disease is the word zoo is within zoonotic disease. Zoo in Latin, or sorry, ancient Greek means animal or life, living organism. And it's a good way to remind children, if you want to use this term, that a zoonotic disease is a disease spread between different species of animals. Now, examples. Can anybody name an example of a disease that jumps between different species? Vanessa, are you available to answer?
Malaria.
Malaria, yep. Malaria is carried through mosquitoes, and insects are a part of the animal kingdom. Absolutely. Any others? Vanessa, would you like to moderate?
I don't see anyone raising their hand yet. So.
Oh, Ebola. Is Ebola there?
Ebola, exactly. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Excellent. Rabies is another one, and sometimes the flu. So you might have heard of swine flu, avian flu, and certainly SARS-CoV-2 is being recognized throughout the scientific community as a disease that has originally come from an animal and into people. And we're also seeing that people can spread SARS-CoV-2 into animals like the mink population, or say, for instance, the tigers and lions in the Bronx Zoo in the United States, as well as some pets, cats and dogs. What is a mutation? What's important to recognize is that this change in behavior or development of something can happen in pretty much anything. It can happen in fruit, in other plants, and in animals. It can happen in you, it can happen in me. A mutation is not necessarily something that's bad. A mutation just means change. A mutation, when it comes to a virus, for instance, can strengthen a virus. A mutation can weaken a virus. Or it can just simply change a virus and not change its strength. It happens very, very frequently in nature. Last thing to cover is, what is a vaccine? It's a substance that prepares the immune system to fight a disease. And you probably know what the immune system in your body is for. Just to review, it's a way to fight any illness that you are experiencing. Now, people have immune systems, animals have immune systems, plants actually have pseudo-immune systems to protect them from parasites. So a vaccine is something to strengthen the body to fight a disease. An example is the flu shot. Now, certainly right now around the world, researchers of various disciplines, coming from veterinary backgrounds, coming from human medicine backgrounds, they're working together to create a vaccine in order to pretty much save the world, which is pretty incredible. Let's go through what One Health is again. We showed the Venn diagram. Remember, environmental health, animal health, and human health. Environmental health, this is a beautiful forest. All of the animals and the trees are spaced out evenly. It's exactly what you want to see. It's healthy. And then something changes. As you can see, the people are moving in, and there are trees being knocked down. Who can tell me why are trees being knocked down in this picture? Oscar?
Urbanization.
Or Ian? Yes, Ian.
Trees are being knocked down to create room for more of the people who have come in.
Yes, trees are being knocked down to accommodate the people who need to live in the area. But think about one step further. If there's more pollution in the area, are trees going to be surviving more? Probably not. If people dirty the water in the area, are the plants going to be surviving? It's going to be very hard for them. So when there's less, oh, and I think Ian, if you don't mind putting yourself on mute, there's a little bit of feedback. Now, if there are less trees, then these animals have to go somewhere, right? If you lose your home, what are you going to do? You're going to look for another home. But there are less options. Comparing this slide to the previous slide, where everything is spaced out so nicely, these same animals are forced into a smaller environment. Now, when that happens, there's going to be more competition for food and for shelter. Just like for you and me, whenever there's stressful situations happening, there could be more signs of illness, right? Their immune systems are what we're thinking about. And so when animals have more signs of illness, that means that they could possibly spread their diseases more. The other thing that's important to realize is that sometimes they're not just staying in the forest. Sometimes these animals are being forced out of the forest, and look what happens. There are more animals near people. And who can tell me the term that we used of a disease that can jump between different species?
Anastasia?
Zoonotic.
A zoonotic disease, excellent. And I think I saw also Ian. Ian, can you give me an example of a zoonotic disease?
Flu, avian flu, Ebola, rabies.
Ebola, exactly. SARS-CoV-2, what's causing the COVID-19 pandemic? Absolutely. So these animals, including people, they're not meant to be so close together. And that can present as a problem. So animals are getting sick because they're getting more stressed with less resources, and then look what happens. Even more trees are being cut down. It's a smaller area. There's more stress for the animals, and the animals are being forced out. Can you imagine about the risk of disease transmission between all of these different species? It's a big concern. And just remember where it all started. It started with how we treat the environment. And that's what One Health is. Environmental health, animal health, and human health. We live on one world. It's all one system. Now, for instance, because of climate change, or because of dirty water, or because of too much competition, one animal has to leave the forest. Either it leaves to go to another forest, or that species goes extinct. Let's say, for the point of argument, that all of the birds are lost. They're gone. Well, there are several things that change when you miss one animal. Who can tell me one of the changes that they see? There are actually 5 changes between this slide and this slide. Raise your hand if you notice anything.
Hi, can I say something?
Yes, please, Natasha.
Yes, as you can see, the birds used to feed on the rats. So when the birds reduced, the rats increased.
Exactly, and that's predator and prey relationship, right? That's ecosystem health. And when you speak to your future students, or your children, or your little brother or sister, and they're just starting to learn about the relationships within a forest, within an ecosystem, that's an important thing to drive home for them. Losing one species, like a predator species, can increase the amount of prey in the environment. Excellent, Natasha, thank you. Anybody else notice a change? So you already covered no birds and more mice. Anything else? Well, there are less trees because other types of birds could be pollinators. And when you lose pollinators, you can also decrease the amount of trees. And you can imagine that can only exacerbate the problem of competition. Now, Natasha already mentioned that there's more rats. Well, what else feeds on rats? Foxes. And so when you have no birds, you have less trees because you lose the pollinators. You have more mice because you lose the birds that typically eat the mice. You have more foxes because they have more mice and rats to feed on. And last but not least, look how many animals are now near all these people. And remember what we said about zoonotic diseases. Now, we just covered the last 5 changes that were reviewed, and it really drives home the point. Right now, we're going to specifically talk about One Health and SARS-CoV-2, or the novel coronavirus, as some people call it. In review, the environment got damaged because of people's actions. Or it could have, this pandemic could have all started in a wet market, or it could have started before people even got to the wet market. Either way, whenever animals are stressed out in an unnatural environment, they have to compete for food, compete for shelter, and they get stressed, right? And there are some species that keep their own germs to themselves. There are some germs, though, that are zoonotic, and they can hop between different animals, different species, and you just don't want some animals to be near each other, because ultimately that's a concern for people. And that means myself, yourself, your family, my mother, my brothers, my future children, right? Now, let's dive into what a mutation actually is. You might have remembered me say that mutations means change, right? Mutation can strengthen a virus, can weaken a virus. It can also happen in a lot of different things like people, animals, plants. Remember that picture of the 6-toed kitten and the very odd-looking strawberry? Well, certainly the SARS-CoV-2 virus has had mutations as recognized by scientists around the world and is considered to be zoonotic, jumping from different species. Now, instead of scaring people about this pandemic, the whole point of onehealthlessons.com and this lesson is to educate the public about how we can manage such a stressful environment and how can we protect ourselves today. We are going to be using models to drive home the points of what we learned today, and I welcome you to use these examples and activities with children in your communities. We're going to start with an activity to go over one way a mutation can happen, and we're going to use a sentence. Now, I need 2 volunteers. Raise your hand if you want to volunteer. Or thumbs up.
I'll volunteer.
Nice. Okay. Actually, we got 3. So I think I heard Vanessa, Corday, and Ian. Okay. So Vanessa, your challenge is to read a sentence 5 times very fast. Very, very quickly. Ready?
Yeah.
Go for it.
A black bug bit a big black bear. 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 Is that 4 or 5?
That was 4, but that was okay. Now, I heard about 6 different mutations in that sentence. I heard about 6 different changes. And keep in mind that it wasn't on purpose, right? It was unexpected, but there were some changes. Let's see. I think, Corday, you were up next. Do you want to try this?
Okay. A black bug bit a big black bear. A black bug bit a big black bear.
Faster.
A black bug bit a big black bear. A black bug bit a big black bear. A black bug bit a big black bear. A black bug bit a big black bear.
Whoa. So I don't know about you, but I did not hear any mutations in that sentence. And one example of a mutation that this particular activity shows or highlights is something called a point mutation. A point mutation is out of all of the DNA or RNA, one single segment of that whole chain has been changed, has been switched. It's like saying a bug bit instead of a black bug bit. You see what I mean? It's just a little trip on itself. Ian, you want to try one?
Yes, sure. A black bug bit a big black bear. A black bug bit a big black bear.
Faster.
A black bug bit a big black bear. A black bug bit a big black bear. A black bug bit a big black bear. A black bug bit a big black bear.
Okay, very good. I heard maybe like 5 mutations. So thank you everybody for participating in that. Another example is that we can, in the body, something can send out a message, but that message is not completely understood or received appropriately. And this next example is going to be about that. So what I'm going to do now is show everybody. I will stop screen sharing so I can see everybody here. And who wants to participate? You are going to say either hi or I, but you will be doing it silently. Okay, Gabriella, say it silently 3 times and we're all going to vote. If we think she says hi, we're going to wave. If we think she says I, we're going to point to our eye. Okay, go for it, Gabriella. Just 2 votes, really? 4 votes? Okay, we all think you said hi. Can you unmute yourself and tell me what you said?
Actually, I was saying hi.
Okay, well, there you go. Okay, thank you very much. Now the next volunteer, Miriam, if you could be, say either heart or art. And if we think you're saying heart, we do this. If we think art, we do this. Okay, go for it. We are unclear. Okay. Corday thought you said heart. I thought you said art. What did you actually say?
I said heart.
Point for Corday. Good job. Okay, who wants to be that last volunteer? How about Malik? Okay, you are going to say either olive juice or I love you. Now, if it's olive juice, we go like this. If it's I love you, we go like this. Okay, go for it, Malik. Oh, it's a mixed bag. What did you actually say?
I said either of juice, either of juice.
Olive juice, you said?
Yeah, all of juice, all of juice.
Well, I definitely lost like the entire round. Okay, well, that's a great example of how we can have miscommunication amongst people, but also within the body. Thank you very much for participating in that. And we are going to get back into talking more about mutations. So that was an example of a problem in translation. When an RNA or a messenger RNA gets translated and creates a protein, sometimes there are issues with it. Sometimes the protein does not get created the way it's meant to. It can happen unexpectedly. And keep in mind, it can make the protein work really well. It can make the protein absolutely non-functional. Mutations are really hard to predict. So what I want you to all do right now is to unmute yourself, and we're going to guess when this virus replicates and splits into two, for instance, is it going to make two different red viruses? We're going to say either red, blue, or purple. So this virus is going to split into two different viruses. Here's one red. Are we going to guess that this is going to be red, blue, or purple? Is there going to be a mutation in it? Okay, everybody say all at once if they think it'll be red, blue, or purple on the count of three. 1, 2, 3.
Red.
Red.
Okay, I heard a lot of red. Let's see what happens.
Red.
Red. Good job, everybody. Now we're going to guess if this is going to be red, blue, or purple, and then red, blue, or purple. Let's say Anastasia. Do you think it's going to be red and red, red, purple, red, blue? What do you think?
Red and red.
Red and red. Let's see what happens. Red and purple. So it mutates once. And say, for instance, Vanessa, do you think this is going to be red, blue, or purple, and red, blue, or purple?
Purple and blue.
Purple and blue. We got one blue, and we got another blue. So look, out of these 6 times, there's actually just been one mutation, which indicates this purple color. So this red mutates, this red replicates, and it turns out to be completely normal. This blue replicates, completely normal. But this, not so much. It's very hard to predict. Now, somebody earlier mentioned avian influenza or bird flu. That's another example of a zoonotic disease, a disease that can jump between different species. This next example illustrates how we actually can see how 2 viruses can come together into the same body and make a brand new virus. And we call this the mystery box. You see, red and blue combine to make purple. It can happen in a pig. This happens in swine flu. It can happen in other species. Now, some people might say, well, when it comes to COVID-19, I hear that bats are the culprit. We should kill all the bats and be done with it. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Bats are so important. Do you remember that slide where I showed that all the birds were wiped out? Well, believe it or not, when it comes to some bats are called keystone species. A keystone species means that they are integral, they are vital for the sustainability of the entire ecosystem. If you miss a bat that's a keystone species, then the entire ecosystem collapses. There will not be any more in that particular slide, no more trees, no more birds, no more rats, no more foxes. It will be looking like a desert where there used to be a forest. So bats are pollinators, they eat insects. They are incredibly important for the health of the ecosystem. Now going back to that combination of the red, the blue, and making that purple, that's actually called genetic reassortment. And so we'll go through that with a sentence example and another competition. We're going to be utilizing the chat box here. So let's start with an example. Once upon a time, we are going to be filling in these blanks. Once upon a time, there was an extremely blank blank who blank to blank blank and blank. This example for the red sentence that represents the red virus goes something like this. Once upon a time, there was an extremely happy man who loved to cook pasta. Well, pasta's delicious, so that makes sense. Once upon a time, there was an extremely loud friend who sang to entertain you. Well, that's very nice. But what would happen when we combine one red sentence and one blue sentence? What will happen? Let's see. Once upon a time, there was an extremely happy friend who loved to entertain pasta. Doesn't really make sense at the end, but we'll see what the next one is. Once upon a time, there was an extremely loud man who sang to cook for you. Well, that really doesn't make sense. You can see from this example with genetic reassortment that the mutation has weakened the sentence in both examples. Again, a mutation can strengthen something, can weaken something, or just plain make it change. Now it's your turn. Let's see who can win the best awkward sentence mutation contest. First, I want everybody to fill in, once upon a time, there was a, and then fill in the blank. Type it in the chat box, and we will see who gets the most creative. Okay, so I see two examples. Now, let's see, Jacob. Oh no, I know that your internet is a little bit hard sometimes. Laura, are you able to read one of those sentences out loud and then the other sentence out loud, and then mix and match the fill-in words, and let's decide together if that mutation, that combination, strengthens or weakens the message of the sentence. Those two.
Once upon a time, there was an alligator that loved to cook pasta for the party.
Okay, so did that weaken or strengthen? What do you think? Was that a better sentence or a worse sentence than the original ones?
Depends on who you're talking to, maybe. I don't know who would appreciate that.
Yep, exactly. It totally depends on who you talk to. Exactly. So you can do this with your children at home to just show that sometimes viruses can combine in one area and make a whole new virus. Okay, thanks for participating for that, everybody. And I am going to screen share again. And now what I want everybody to do is choose one set of these numbers. Okay, so if you're on team 1 to 2, just remember that. You can be on team 1 to 4, or 3 and 2, and 3 and 4. And this will make more sense a little bit later on. But what we're going to explore right now together is why are some viruses spread more easily than others? Everybody has their set numbers in mind? Okay, let's move on. Well, in order to understand why some viruses seem to transmit more than others, we have to really understand the anatomy or the structure of a virus. In principle, a virus is consisting of two parts, an outer shell and an inner core. Now, say for instance, this red virus, it could be with a red outer core and a red outer shell and a red inner core to make a normal virus. Or it could be more like a red outer core and a a red outer shell and a blue inner core to make a mutation. When it comes to the blue, the same thing happens. The blue outer shell, the blue inner core creates a normal blue virus. Or it could be a mutated virus. Now, when it comes to the shell and the core, they technically have different roles. The outer shell determines how easy is that virus. How easy is it for it to get into a cell, into a host, into a living organism? How easy is that to invade, okay? The core determines, well, once you're inside that other organism, is it going to replicate a lot? Is it going to make a lot of itself? Or is it not going to make a lot of itself and just stay pretty much dormant in another living organism that we call the host? So remember those numbers? We're going to go through a little example. Now keep in mind, for this example, the red shell is having a high infectious rate. Okay, this is very easy to invade other cells. Whereas the blue shell is having a very difficult time invading host cells. When it comes to the core that's responsible for the replication, the blue core, once it gets into a cell, it is incredibly good at replicating itself. However, the red core, as you can see here, is not good at replicating itself once it's in a cell. Now remember those numbers, those sets of numbers? We're going to go through a little math problem here. Now, if you are of the team 3 and 1, look where your numbers go. So raise your hand or give me a thumbs up if you were of the team 1 and 2. Ian and Anastasia. Okay, so your team's total is 3 because 1 is lower, it is let's say a low infectious rate, and 2 is a low replication rate. Adding those two together, you make 3. So your team's total is 3 for your impact in the world. Who is team 1 and 4? Raise your hand if you were team Jacob. So 1 and 4, 1 plus 4 is 5. So 5 is what's a normal type of virus. You see, this blue core, this blue shell is the normal virus. Who is team 3 and 2? Nobody. Interesting. So you can see here, this is a normal virus with the number 5. And who was ever 3 and 4 gets 7. Who can tell me, after looking at this, what do the 2 mutations do in this example? If you compare the 2 mutations out of these 4, right? Knowing that this is a normal virus and this is a normal virus, who can tell me what the mutations have done to this virus? Corday.
So the first mutation increased the infectivity rate of the virus. So it produced a more infective virus, while the second mutation created a virus that was less infective compared to like a regular unmutated virus.
Yeah, and so for simplicity, we could say this strengthened the virus, this weakened the virus. You can go in with your students and compare and contrast. So this virus, once it gets into a cell, can replicate a lot more compared to this virus. Why? Because the blue core has a higher number and therefore it can replicate a lot more. Comparing these 2 viruses, this virus does not replicate nearly as much as this virus. And since this virus is normal, that means that this virus is weaker. Any questions on that? Just to highlight the 2 mutations, we're coloring them purple. And this just shows again that a virus can be strengthened with a mutation, or it could be weakened with a mutation. A mutation just means change. And remember, mutations can be incredibly difficult to predict. Now, this is what's incredibly important to bring home and understand in your community, how we can protect ourselves. How can we protect our families, our loved ones? Well, we can certainly wash our hands for at least 20 seconds with soap and water. Does anybody know a song that can last for at least 20 seconds so that you can teach your siblings and your children? Any song for them to sing while they wash their hands?
Happy birthday?
How many times?
Twice?
Yep. Sing happy birthday twice. Or you can sing the ABCs. Or you can sing Let It Go from Frozen. I don't know if you want that, it'll get stuck in your head. Also, cover your cough and sneeze with your elbow, like that. And then if you can, as soon as possible, wash your elbow, right? Because you don't want to cover your cough or sneeze with your elbow like this and then fold your hands and then you contaminate your other hand. If you do cover your sneeze with a tissue, then make sure that you throw it out in a lined trash can so you do not contaminate the trash. And then afterward, wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds. Do not touch your nose, your mouth, your eyes with any dirty hands. The only time you can touch your nose, mouth, and eyes is if you make sure that you have just cleaned your hands. Wipe your surroundings with appropriate cleaners and make sure you keep your distance. Wearing a mask is also very important, and follow your local public health guidelines. Now, for the next few minutes, we're going to look at a video from Mythbusters, which is this phenomenal program from the Discovery Channel. And we're going to see, using different food dyes, how far a sneeze can actually travel. Enjoy. And I want you to tell me afterward what surprises you.
There's one. Yeah. Oh, there's another one coming. For each style, they're going to unleash a sample of 3 sneezes. Oh, it looks horrible, doesn't it? I look like a vampire. Ah, Adam's face is a picture, but it's the canvas that tells the real story.
I see spots up to 8 feet away, dude.
Yeah, it did spread quite a lot, but there's a lot of markings here. So I'd say single hand, not so good.
Yeah, not so good.
Not so good, and then some. Even with his hand directly in front of the oncoming sneeze, Adam can't begin to contain the explosion.
Now, I'm pretty clear sneezing into your hand is meant as a courtesy to those around you to keep from spreading your germs onto them. And as far as I can see, it's quite effective at doing exactly the opposite. I noticed there's almost no red dye on me at all, and crap loads all around me. If I was on a subway, I'm Typhoid Mary.
With the hand getting the thumbs down, can the elbow do any better? To find out, it's over to Jamie, and he'll be sneezing in green.
Now, we wait for the sneeze to take effect on Jamie's Who's nose. Slowly, it irritates the cilia inside.
And with the cilia salivating, three sneezes later, and the results are very impressive.
Yeah, I see only 2 droplets and 1 on your shoe, and let's look at your elbow hair. That's totally localized to you, man.
And you know what? It's all on my arm and not on my hand, so I'm not as likely to spread it around.
Yeah, it's doubly effective.
Hands down, the elbow is a highly effective technique, with virtually the entire sneeze contained on each of Jamie's sneezes. But can the humble Hanky do better still? Well, it's back to Adam, and for this final test, he's sneezing in blue.
How do we do? I see a tiny dot of blue there.
At first, it seems like the Hanky may be victorious, until
I see some on the hanky.
And look, it's penetrated all the way to both sides.
It's penetrated both sides, and perhaps most damningly, it's on my hands, ready to spread to the next person whose hand I shake.
the sneeze seeped through the hanky, contaminating Adam's hand, making it a pretty poor technique. And it gets worse.
Let me make one more thing clear about this hanky I'm holding here. Imagine, achoo, you sneezing it all day long. You keep on putting it in your pocket, pulling it back out, giving people change from your pocket, handing them your pen, handing them your phone, talking on your phone, spreading germs. Yeah, it's not just a Rorschach test, it's a petri dish.
Okay, so can somebody raise their hand and tell me, was there anything that surprised you? Or or if nothing surprised you, what do you want to make sure that your children and the other children in the community know about what you just saw? Miriam.
Just noticed that whenever they sneeze in their elbow, it's less form of contagious because you don't have it in your hands, and I think that's very important.
Yep. Yeah, it seems like the elbow spreads the least amount of germs around. Perfect.
Right.
Thank you for that. Now, let's just finish up and talk about how can we protect ourselves in the future. We already talked about how we can protect ourselves and our families today, keeping our distance, making sure we sneeze and cough properly, staying away from others if we're feeling sick. And when I say others, I include our pets. But let's talk about our future. Right now, scientists, including physicians and veterinarians and other researchers, are now working toward a vaccine together. And you might think, why are veterinarians involved? Well, because animal models are used before vaccines are actually implemented in people. So it's incredibly important to include those types of researchers. It's really important to stay away from animals that really don't necessarily belong in nature to be right near people. we can give animals diseases. Diseases can come from animals to us. So what's really important is to respect that distance. And what's also important is to rebuild that forest, right? Rebuild the habitat where these animals are meant to be living, either in a green forest or in the ocean or in a lake. We need to improve the health of the environment if we want to get a handle on our own health. Again, right now, there are people around the world working towards getting a vaccine, as well as some treatments for COVID-19. If you want to get more children involved in your community and you have access to the internet in a reliable fashion, I do recommend eBug, which is a website. And if you go to the note section of this slide, you'll have the link there. And I want to thank you all for your attention. It's been about 47 minutes and I welcome any questions. Thank you very much.